So part 2 is where I'm going to talk about arrows. So please forgive the dripping. My landlord's cleaning the windows. So what we have is, because there's not a great deal of difference or personalisation within bows, you can really express your personality and individuality through your choice of arrows. So I have a number of different arrows here, and as you can see, you can really go quite extreme or quite individual with your choice in cresting, fletching, nocks, the whole lot. But each variation has its purpose, and that's what I'm going to go into now. So if I park these here. So let's start from, well, let's just talk in general about arrows. So arrows, when you buy them from a shop or from a supplier, you get a spine range which is within 5 spine, which reflects the draw weight of the bow. So it could either be 40-45 or excuse me, or 35-40, 55-60, something like that. And the rule of thumb is to go roughly 10 spine below the draw weight of the bow that you're shooting. So this number represents the spine of flat bows, and obviously they're centre cut, so you can shoot a stiffer arrow through the centre. And obviously we're reliant on the paradox of the arrow, so we need a weaker spine to accommodate that. But the faster bow you're shooting, the stiffer you can push your arrow, and it can be preference. Well, it's my personal preference to shoot a slightly stiffer arrow because it's, in my opinion, it's waggling less in flight. Yes, I have to weigh them off slightly to the right, but I get straighter flight and a slightly better trajectory. And it means that when I'm aiming, my target is clear and it's not obstructed by my hand or whatever aiming system I'm using. So let's start here. Here we have I think this is a spruce shaft, and I've got some 4-inch shield cut fletchings on it. Obviously I've covered it in paint because I can. And this one was made for the Wood Archery 3Ds in France, but it doubled as an indoor set for that season. And what makes this arrow suited for indoors is this larger fletching produces a great deal of drag and stability, which can give you a bit of forgiveness and helps my haphazard field archery form, and you can get away with it a little bit more indoors. Conversely, you're going to want and obviously you can have parabolics. This one is actually one of Richard Powell's arrows. Here we have a longer fletch. But for outdoors, you're going to want something quite a bit smaller, and for obvious reasons, you're going to get reduced drag, and your arrow is going to go a bit faster, a bit further before it starts to slow down. Because it's travelling a further distance, it's got more time to stable out, to straighten up and stabilise. So you don't need to get it to come out of the bow dead straight away. But if you've got a good match, it's going to come out relatively well anyway. Unlike your other arrows, your recurve or compound arrows, you can have parallel shafts, which are like the ones I've just shown you, or you can have rear tapered, and you can have barreled. So these are some barreled arrows that I'm currently shooting now. These are my these are my current arrows that I shoot indoors and outdoors, and I really like these arrows. These are really good arrows. These are an 11-32 diameter shaft, which is tapered to the front to 5/16 and to 9/32 at the back. And this is a really good spec of arrow for outdoors. As you know, the barreling gives you better trajectory. It's got some small flights, the small fletchings give you good stability, whilst not compromising your arrow speed. Giant mosquito in my face. And I think it's got a slightly lighter weight pile on to reduce the overall weight of the arrow. So I think this is in the region of, apologies if I get this wrong, it's in the region of 360-380 grain. Which for my 50-pound draw weight is sort of at the limit, I think, of the weight you'd go. Because if you go any lighter, you're at risk of damaging your bow through essentially mildly dry firing it every time, and there's a life to a bow, and obviously it's going to reduce its life expectancy essentially. But this is a lovely arrow. I get a really good point of aim with this arrow. It's for a start, it's cut to my draw length, which is useful. Whereas some of my other arrows, I'll grab one, some of them are considerably longer, and this can help with reducing your gaps if you're gap shooting, and it can help. It's something I use to match them to the bow. I manipulate the length and the point weight to dynamically stiffen or weaken the arrow as you would with a carbon or something. You can do the same with wooden arrows, but it's only really useful at short distances because you're giving it extra mass weight, which is just going to slow you down at the longer distance. And if you're really serious, you can go for a footed arrow. So here we have a footed arrow, again made by Cliff of Raven, and this is again a barreled shaft to the same spec as this one, but it has this hardwood footing at the bottom. So this hardwood footing is supposed to give it a bit more forward weight to help cut through the wind a bit better, as well as making this front end a little bit tougher. You can see a lot of well, you used to see a lot of footed shafts in field archery with some hefty footings on to help prevent breaks, and I think the same sort of reasoning clout, as well as the whole wind issue. Other people have different opinions on that, but I really like these. I'd never have personally bought a footed shaft because it's quite a faff to do, and they are quite expensive. They're about £180 for a dozen. But after having shot one, they're really good arrows, especially outdoors at long distance. This particular arrow is the one I got my 90-meter UK record with, and the ones that I've shot all of my outdoor PBs with, pretty much, these footed arrows last season. So if you're really committed, it is worth investing in a set of these for outdoors. And that being said, all about the different flights and things, you can still shoot a faster, smaller fletched arrow indoors, and that is what I have been doing of late. I've been shooting my, as I mentioned earlier, I've been shooting my 50-pound bow, and I've been using exactly this arrow, and it's been performing excellently. I can't argue at all. I've got a couple of UK records with this one, with these arrows and this bow in combination, because they just match so well. And that brings me on to another point. And obviously, you can put together wooden arrows quite easily. You can throw on some fletchings, you can chuck on a point, and away you go, essentially. But when you buy shafts, they come within a range of weights and a range of spines, as I said, within this 5-spine bracket. And normally, shops sell you 0 to 30 grain spread. Although if you buy from certain places, for example the Longbow shop, they best they can will try and get that group as tight as possible to reduce that spread. But even so, through the whole making an arrow process, it can be very time consuming, and you can often, well, it's been my experience that I've come out with arrows that are less than, are not as good as I perhaps wanted. And it's only recently that I actually got hold of some arrows that are made by some proper arrow makers, and the difference is staggering. As I said, these were the ones I got first, and I think my scores went up by 100 points from like the 700s to the 800s and the 1440, and like I said, over 200 points 90 meters was my UK record with this particular arrow. And it's just fantastic to have ones that are matched that tightly and that well. And for the price you pay, in relative terms, for a set of matched arrows, it's not that much more really than all of the ingredients and perhaps the time that you put into making them. So it is well worth considering making arrows. And these particular ones, again, are made by Cliff of Raven Longbows. And in the absence of people like Little John or Gary Evans, who used to make arrows like this, there's not many people left that do them, but Cliff is certainly one of the better ones, and certainly one I'd recommend taking a look at for a set of matched arrows, because they are outstanding. But again, other bowyers I've mentioned will make you matched arrows. It's just these are my preference, and these are the ones that I'm recommending to people right now. So that's arrows. But that being said, you can get away with a lot indoors. Go with quite a lot indoors. As I said, this is quite a long arrow. It, in theory, perhaps shouldn't work that well. I think this is actually a Rose City Archery ready-made arrow that I acquired when I got my first bow, which was a Richard Head, which I still have, excellent bow, and another bow here to consider. And these, as you can see, as you may have mentioned, a lot of my fletchings are quite scraggly and quite scruffy, and a lot of people are quite anal about the quality of their fletchings, but it's really not that important, even over perhaps some of the longer distances, because the only purpose of a fletching is to stabilise the arrow in flight, and it's going to do that regardless of whether it's got chunks missing or it's a little bit flat or whatever. It's still going to serve its purpose. And even as far as it goes with, it's more important that the shaft is straight. And so if you look down the shaft or even spin it in your hand and it jumps around, then it needs straightening. That's far more important than what the fletchings look like. And a lot of them now, well, almost all of them have plastic nocks, taper fit nocks. You basically taper with like a big pencil sharpener the end of the shaft into a cone, and you fit these plastic nocks on. And because of that, even if you get a Robin Hood or you split your arrow, you can glue it, fold it back together, put another knock on, and your arrow is good to go. And a lot of people might be grimacing at that, but I've only done that really for my 40-pound bow, and I've never had a problem. And pretty much all of these Rose City Archery arrows that I have remaining have all been shot or been split at the ends, and they've had fletchings come off and this and that, and I've just folded them back together, glued them, and they were like that when I shot and won the British indoors a couple of years ago, for instance. So how the fletchings look isn't all that important. It's more important that the shaft is straight and that the shafts are matched, because a large grain spread is going to particularly show over a longer distance, and a lot of people neglect their arrows, particularly straightness, and I think that is the most important thing not to overlook when looking at an arrow, or when maintaining your arrows, is how straight they are. So it's perhaps an idea to consider getting a set made up for tournaments that you're going to use for the bow that you've chosen, just so that you've got a really high grade matched set. That's not something I would have recommended until I actually had a set myself and noticed the difference. Until then, any old set the shops tell you are probably going to do fine to get started, or if you've got some time on your hands and you've got a fletching jig, which you perhaps do already, having already not being necessarily new to archery, you can relatively quickly throw an arrow together. All you need is the shaft itself, which you can get from a shop pre-matched, some piles, some nocks and some fletchings, 45 pounds, and you've got a dozen arrows that you can shoot and practice with. And it's not a bad idea to have some cheaper arrows in. I use my not so nice arrows for my blank bossing and for my training in here. I've only got about 3 or 4 meters in this garage, and that's what I use. Or I use old ones that I don't shoot anymore that much, because they do get damaged and they do get worn with use, and they do get compressed at the ends and things like that. And to save you investing a lot of money long term, that's perhaps what I'd recommend if you can afford it. If not, you can still make a reasonable set with your with the components you buy from a shop or online. For instance, this really naff set I shot some reasonable scores with, and if you've got extra time, you can paint them by hand and make them look really pretty and really nice. This isn't one of mine, I don't have the time for that, but it can be done. So that's arrows. And equally to go with that, there's a whole massive debate about whether you should shoot with a finger tab or a glove. If you come from recurve, I'd recommend you stick with what you're used to, which will hopefully be a finger tab. This is the one I use. It's the Kissigly KSL Gold tab. Just because I wanted to try it and I bought it and I used it so much that I got used to it, and now it's my preferred tab. But you can use anything. Here's another one. It's a regular recurve tab, or an even more slightly primitive, just straight leather tab. These all are fine to use, and it's my preference to use a tab because I believe you do get that smoother release than you do with the glove. With the glove, in the past. It's sort of stuck to my fingers a bit, and it's really sort of emphasised the whole smooth release thing that you hear about. And it's worth compromising a bit of temporary dexterity in that hand just to have the tab on, he says as he gets one stuck to his bloody finger. But yeah, I'd recommend a tab over a glove, even if it's not your first preference. Just give it a go, because it can't hurt. But that being said, again, I know some incredibly good archers that shoot with a glove, so it can be done. This is just my preference, and that's what, again, this video is about, my recommendations. But definitely something you should try by all means. Point being, if you already have one, stick to using it, because it's going to be what you're used to and what you're most comfortable using. I think that's everything for now. I hope that's been useful to those of you that want to know a bit more about the technical side of competitive longbow archery, if such a thing exists. And that's hopefully covered all the bits and pieces you perhaps need to think about getting out there and getting on the shooting line with us. I'll be doing another one for beginners, because I'll give slightly different advice to people that haven't shot before, but I'll cover that in another video. Hopefully I'm going to start doing a bit more of these. Hopefully this wasn't too terrible. But yeah, thanks for watching.